Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Quinn Whiffen with Vertical Measures, and I'm here hosting VM's monthly webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Content is Data, and will be presented by our special guest, Chris Baggott. After co-founding ExactTarget, one of the world's most successful publicly traded email service providers, Chris saw an opportunity to branch out into content marketing. So in 2007, Chris launched Compendium, the leading content marketing platform helping organizations capture and create original content in a branded hub for distribution to any marketing channel. Also, Chris is frequently quoted in national business and marketing trade magazines and speaks regularly on the topic of digital marketing. We're very excited to have him with us today. Before I get started and hand over the presentation to Chris, I just have a few things to note. Today's webinar will be available by the latest Monday afternoon, if not sooner, barring any technical difficulties. We'll also be happy to answer any of your questions. So if you take a peek at your webinar interface, you'll see a little question applet where you can send anything you'd like me to ask Chris at the end of his presentation. Also, you can tweet us with the hashtag VMWebinar, and I'll get your questions that way too. If we don't get to your questions, we'll try to get to them afterwards via email. If you're having any technical difficulties, please just attempt to reconnect. So with all my notes complete, I'll hand it off to our special guest presenter, Chris Baggott.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Quinn, and hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for showing up today. Yeah, the topic of content is data is sort of a new one. There's a lot of talk about data and big data. Just first a little bit about Compendium. You know, it's interesting, Quinn mentioned ExactTarget, and you know, ExactTarget and email marketing, that is content marketing, right? So many people think of content marketing down a narrow channel like search, but the reality is content marketing incorporates search, social, email, mobile, print. It's all content. And Compendium software is just a company designed to help everyone manage and deploy that. One of my gurus, mentors, if you will, Seth Godin, has basically fallen back to all marketing is content marketing. And it's really important in today's day and age because 70% of all consumers prefer to learn about companies from original content, right? People don't respond to ads. And I'm sorry this is jumping ahead like this. I'm not sure why. But as we start talking about data, and probably the biggest buzzword I hear anymore is big data. So one of the things I wanted to set out to do was just kind of define that. And you know, nobody better than IBM, I thought, would be a good person to define it, or a good company. And basically, they break it down to three components: volume, variety, and velocity. Big data really focuses on the growing mass of terabytes and petabytes of data being generated. And this plays into content marketing as well, because I think a couple of years ago, if you thought of yourself as a content marketer, maybe you focused on your blog and you wrote a blog post every once in a while, or a blog post a day or a week. But the reality is that to be successful today in content marketing requires a vast amount of content, more content than you can probably write. It's impossible to have too much content. So as you think about content as data, you have to think about content in terms of high volume. And this is small businesses and large. Of course, volume is relevant, or relative, I should say, but think in much higher volumes than you're thinking about it today. Variety, and this refers to structured and unstructured data pouring in from sources all over the place, right? And you think about your real world now. We have email, we have Outlook email, we have people tweeting, people Facebooking, searches being done, and the kind of content that needs to be told or distributed based on personas and where people are in the funnel and who they are and where they live, and you know, just all the variety of content. And of course, content is traditionally unstructured data. It's very difficult to index content and to pull it out and use it in real time. And that gets to velocity. How quickly is data being delivered? You know, people are expressing behaviors that we can capture. A person has. I had this conversation with one of my employees today, and he happens to have red hair, and he has glasses, and he wears funny T-shirts. But right now he's wearing a blue T-shirt. What do I do right now about that blue T-shirt? And that gets to velocity, right? Is data is now real time, and messaging is real time. Google does a great job of this, right? They're going to try and serve you the best answer right this very second based on all kinds of attributes, including who you know and where you live. So velocity in data becomes really important. So data is, or content is, in fact, big data based on these definitions. Most companies have a large content gap. Sorry about that. This is a little piece of research we did for apartments.com, just kind of comparing how they are on content to their biggest competitors. And as you can see, they basically have 119,000, we call them content elements, pieces of content that are out on the web, compared to apartmentguide.com that has 2 million pieces of content. Now imagine who's more successful here on search, in social, on email. This is a bigger is better kind of environment nowadays. So when you're thinking about content in this new world of content and data, the first place you need to start is with your planning of content. And we still love the, sorry about this, I don't know why I'm jumping ahead, but we still like the tried and true personas. Doing a grid and trying to break down every possible customer profile that you can have. And again, if I'm selling apartments and that's my job, I want to be able to target and focus in on behaviors and fears and challenges and motivations and questions and needs and expectations, as well as basic demographic pieces of data. This gives us a really good guideline to create content. We think about stages also. So not only the persona, who is the prospect, but where is the prospect in the buying cycle? And so you look at various stages like awareness, consideration, inquiry, purchase, retention. Where are they? So not only do I need content broken down by all those persona attributes, but also funnel attributes, right? So you can see how this multiplies quickly. And a tool we like to use is it's called topic modeling. With the topic model, you basically want to start with your core. So in this case, apartments. And then you start thinking about all the different interests and areas of interest around apartments. So decorating, location, those become topics. And then you break out even further into individual topics, and you develop content around those. So if one of the topics is decorating, what is the content that you can create based on your personas and your life cycle around decorating, right? I want to paint the bedroom. Am I allowed to paint my rental? How do I redecorate on a budget? Can I move in without painting it? This has white walls, therefore it's a clean palette, right? There's all kinds of content that could be created around the personas, around the life cycle, and around the topic that you're targeting. So this should hopefully give you an idea of, and this may sound difficult, but it's really not that difficult. Once you break it all down and you make these topic assignments, this is not a hard exercise. And then what you wind up with is more of a grid of, okay, I've got Joe, I have all her personas and attributes, and where she is in the funnel, and what content is right for her. And this all becomes indexable content, right? This becomes a data attribute, just like the fact that her name is Jill Brown. Another data attribute is single working mom. Another data attribute is consideration. And then that content element becomes another data attribute. And the whole idea here is being able to assemble the right content to the right person at the right time through the right channel. Editorial calendars are really, really critical when you're trying to do this. If you want to be successful in content marketing, you sort of have to have a plan. What content is going to be where and when? How do I deploy this? So you want to have content that can be deployed equally out to search, out to the various social channels, out to your email marketing library to be able to pull. So let's say Jill comes in on a search, you want her to see one thing. Now Jill is on Facebook and her best friend just moved into one of your apartments. Well, how do you get that exposed onto Facebook, Twitter, and things like that help cover that channel? And then maybe you're going to send her a follow-up because she filled out a form as the lead. You you want to make sure you've got the right content in there as well. So all content is search-worthy, all content is email-worthy, and all content is social-worthy. And having a calendar really helps you map out your campaigns and how you want this content to appear. Once you decide how you're going to do this, you actually have to do it. Where am I going to get all this content? And there's, popular content tactics, right? We talked about social, blogs, email, article, case studies, image. So let's talk specifically about various content types. Where do you get it? Original content. Sorry about that. Original content is an obvious one. Excuse me. That's content you write, and we all are familiar with that. You can make content assignments either to your own employees, which is an untapped market in almost every business, as well as make assignments out to people you hire to write content. And depending on the business, I own a small sustainable farm. I pay a woman $10 a recipe to write recipes based on the kind of product. So if I'm trying to promote chickens, I want to have a bunch of chicken recipes to go as part of my content marketing strategy. I'm perfectly capable of writing about the farm, but I need to hire her because I'm not a very good cook and I want to have people writing about recipes. Curated content is another kind. There's customer-generated content, repurposed content, and what we call customer interactions, which some people call frequently asked questions, but I really like to refer to simply as Outlook email. And we'll go through each of these. One of the nice things about creating your own content, it's helpful to have tools that let you know if you're doing a good job. There are rules about what makes good content. For example, do you have an image, video, link, an engaging title, keyword usage, a lot of these things. None of them are any specific thing that says this is a great piece of content, but collectively they can all help guide you on what makes good content. Knowing your keywords is really, really important, not just for SEO, which is becoming actually less and less important, but also keyword research gives you great insight into the language of your customer. As you do keyword research about your industry, you learn how your customers are thinking about things. So, there used to be a model that said, stuff keywords in here and you'll win search, and that really doesn't hold water anymore. But if I land on a piece of content that uses my language, or as Matt Cutts at Google says very well, keywords are the language of your customer. So you want to make sure you're incorporating the language of your customer. So you're talking in terms that they understand and use. But that's all about original content. Then there's curated content. Being able to do research and find other people who are talking about the things that you want to talk about. And then you're perfectly allowed to write snippets. Hey, I saw this great post today about subject X, and here's what I liked about it, and then link back to that original story. But if people can consume the highlights of the story on your site, and you make sure you have great calls to action leading them to where you want them to go versus out, curated content can be a very effective strategy. My favorite, and it depends on whether you're B2B or B2C, but my favorite is generating customer-generated stories. And I'll use a case here of Gymboree, which has a chain of, they don't like me to call them daycare centers, but play and learning centers that are really, really successful. They're all over the country. I think they have a few hundred of them. And they constantly focus on soliciting stories from their parents. So if your son or daughter is in one of their programs, you're going to get emails from them. Their Facebook page is always about soliciting stories, and they want to hear about, what was the favorite activity that Billy had today, and submit a picture of their favorite game, or why would, those kind of things. They're not really saying, please rank Gymboree Play and Learning on a scale of 1 to 5. They want to get these real human stories, and they get these stories by the hundreds every week. And people upload pictures and tell their story and talk about it. When they submit that share your story, it goes into an internal curation queue where then people can evaluate those stories, add links, maybe format them a little better, and use them a lot for their blog. They use them for their email marketing. But one of the coolest things they do, and this is a great strategy for social, is they trigger a separate email that goes out. And when someone submits an email or submits a story, they trigger an email that basically says, thanks for telling your story, share it. This is exactly what the email looks like. No fluff, no muff, but really attractive. and a very, very clear call to action. You hit that share your story, and let's say I'm Mom A. I'm sharing my story on my Facebook page. All of my friends, by definition, are people like me. So now all of a sudden I've turned Facebook into this magnetic lead generation tool. And this is a great, great content marketing strategy and a really good way to get lots and lots of relevant content that can be used down all of your main channels, which again are search, social, and email. Repurpose content. Every scrap of content that has ever been created in your organization needs to be reevaluated and processed. So if you do white papers or you do newspaper inserts or ads, everything should be going into your content engine and have the opportunity to be repurposed. If you do PowerPoints or webinars, every slide on a PowerPoint is an opportunity for a blog post. So think about repurposing content that already exists. If you do email newsletters and use any of the major vendors, none of those email newsletters are ever indexed by the search engines, right? So you can go back to 10 years worth of email newsletters, look at the content you created there, and odds are a lot of that can be repurposed for search by putting it out to your blog. So if you're trying to increase your search traffic, which requires a lot of content, you probably have it in a library someplace that you're not even using. It's thrown away. This is my favorite for most businesses. Email, Outlook email, right? Outlook style email, if you will. The idea is that I have a lot of people tell me my employees won't blog. I can't get them to write me a blog post. Do they send email? Well, yeah, they send 5 emails a day or 10 emails a day or 20 emails a day or 2 emails a day, whatever the number is. All of those emails are potential blog posts. If someone writes in and says, why should I buy from you, and some salesperson writes a 3-paragraph email about how perfect your product is for this particular opportunity, that's probably a blog post, and that should be submitted. So in this case, we have a simple, as you can see in the blind copy line, a simple blind copy that sends this over to a curator, a marketing coordinator, somebody who has the opportunity to evaluate, edit this content, maybe depersonalize it, and push it out as live content for search, for social, for email. And email is the biggest waste of content in organizations because we all have it and none of us use it for anything other than these one-off communications that are gone tomorrow. So the biggest idea I have for you today is this. Once you've created the content that you need to publish it. And I'm just going to share some examples of how different organizations are publishing content. And the first is the University of Indiana University, Big Ten school, and basically they invite their freshmen to basically blog. So they trigger emails out to them, they solicit content, they allow freshmen to volunteer to be student bloggers. And it's really cool because these students are telling stories about life on campus. And again, back to the original, like we did with Chimboree, these are the kind of stories that get shared like mad. So if, Chris Baggott is a freshman in Indiana and he's writing about his favorite restaurant or what he likes about history or who knows what, he's going to share his story, his content out to his Facebook page and his social network. And of course, all of my friends are probably either college freshmen or seniors in high school, and this is how they turn their content marketing into a terrific recruiting engine for them. In business-to-business categories and landing pages, repurposing content everywhere. One of the most important trends coming up in search is going to be something called author rank. And author rank has to do with who the author is in relation to you, the reader. So if you are an authority, or if you're a friend, let's say you're an authority on fried chicken. We'll go back to my example from my farm. So you type in, let's say you're not an authority, you're looking for fried chicken recipes, and you type in fried chicken recipes. A big part of the algorithm Google's going to be looking for nowadays is, first of all, local. How close is this person or this answer geographically to me? So if I live in Greenfield, Indiana, which I do, and someone has written about fried chicken recipes in Greenfield, there's a very good chance that that content's going to show up for me. But the other thing is, if there is someone in my social network who has written about fried chicken, that is going to show up for me. And you can see how it shows up in author rank with a picture. So as I'm looking at this page of all these results and I see someone I know, that's a real important data attribute that is going to be very important. And this is why it's really important to spread your authorship out, right? Traditionally, we may have one author, or we make everything anonymous. You need to personalize your author now. And in B2B and B2C as well, this means empowering your employees. One of our examples is Bass Pro Shops that they really want to do a lot on local search. When I'm typing in fly fishing rod and I live in Arkansas, they want that to show up. They empower all of their employees to create content. They incent them, or they reward them, they cajole them. They want to hear everything to do with fishing in every store location they have, in every hunting location they have. And that author rank really starts to play because these social networks start to get really, really broad, as you know. So you need to think about authors as far as your content as well. And from the time now, we've created content, we've identified what kind of content we need, we've created it, and now we have to focus on distribution. And again, I'm going to look at your employees. Your employees are terrific folks for distribution of content. You want to make sure that people share your content a lot. Well, people don't like to share content about you. They like to share content about them. That's why this Gymboree program works so well, because they don't ask, why, what do you think of me? They ask, why are you doing this? What problem are we solving for you? Why did you come to us in the first place? You get people talking about themselves, and they will share that. In B2B, we see a lot of examples, and in my own employees, I'm telling them, listen, you need to start every sentence with an imaginary, I just hung up the phone with, ... right? And now, hey, I just hung up the phone with someone from Wisconsin who had this problem, and they were concerned about this, and here's how we helped them. And, those are the kind of stories that get shared. And then all of this needs to be measured. You've got to demonstrate the value of content marketing. And you've got to look at it across all of these channels. The way I measure success is by acquisition. At the end of the day, 90% of all marketing dollars are being spent on acquisition. Am I filling the funnel? Am I converting? Am I closing business? And looking at my web traffic, my lead quality, am I making sales? These are all the ways that we look at it. Gymboree looks at their social media program under one lens, and that lens is acquisition. How many leads did I get from Facebook? Not how many people liked my Facebook page or any of that, but specifically how much business is driven in from Facebook. And the same thing from your SEO rankings to, whatever your measures are. But ultimately, we all make money by ringing our cash registers and selling stuff, and that has to be the measure. So anything you do in content has to be measured. And when you think about these content elements, content is data. What's really cool about this model is you can measure your content across all channels independently. If I've got a story about Jill Brown, and I can see how much money that piece of content makes me, or how many leads that piece of content makes me across channels. It got me this much on search, it got me this much on social, it got me this much on email. I'm going to repurpose that next year. And we have a client that sells tires, a big client that sells millions and millions of tires. And they reward their salespeople for answering emails and submitting those emails in. So 2 years ago, somebody submitted an email asking the question, why do I need snow tires? And one of their salespeople answered that in 3 quick paragraphs. Here's why you need snow tires. They submitted that to a blog post. On search, and they wrap amateur code around it, so they know when somebody clicks through on that, what post they click through on. And so in the winter of 2010 and 11, that piece of content on search made $10,000 in sales. Here comes the winter of 2011, 2012, as they start strategizing their campaigns around snow tires, right? Remember the calendar, the personas. They first go in and they internally curate all their old content. What content do we have about snow tires? How has that content performed for us in the past? They found, and this is just one example, they found this specific piece of content. Remember, it was free. It came from an email that made $10,000. Now they set up a campaign around that piece of content that includes search, social. They tweeted about it all winter long. They pushed it to their Facebook all winter long. They used it in email at the right time to the right person all winter long. And that same piece of content, one element, made $60,000 the second year in its existence, right? You think about that. A throwaway email, Outlook email, that is now worth $70,000, and that's one piece of content out of thousands of pieces of content that they're creating and measuring. And that's the idea behind content as data. And with that, I will conclude and open up to any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. You have a wealth of expertise, I can tell, and those specific examples are really great to see how tangible and effective this actually can be. So we do have a couple questions. I have one to start off from Jennifer, and she asked, how can I find how many pieces of content my company currently has out there, as in your apartments.com example?
Right. Well, the first thing you can do is start doing searches on yourself. There are tools that we have at Compendium that that's part of our service that we'll do for you. I think Vertical Measures would be able to help you with that as well. But the hard way is do searches. Obviously, look at all of the emails you ever sent. Those are good ways to get started. Okay, count your blog posts, things like that.
Yeah. We have another question in regards to repurposing content. It's from B. Baum. He says, did I understand correctly that you can utilize news releases as blog content as well?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I mean, anything that you would put out on PR Newswire should go into your blog, right? And you can also write about it on your blog and link to it on PR Newswire or PR Newswire and link back. But yes, definitely. You're the canonical version of that content. You want to make sure that it comes to you first and it's clear that you own this content, right? When you put out a PR Newswire, it shows up on Yahoo. You want Google to know that you're the authority of that content, not Yahoo. You want to expose it to Yahoo because that might get you more views than if they, just on your own web presence. But for sure, you want to make sure you post that.
Okay, great. And then we've got one from Twitter too. What was that?
Well, you can post it a lot of different ways, right?
Yeah.
The press release is kind of an outdated model of saying I have to write these 4 paragraphs in this format because I've got to submit it to these entities, and that's the only way they'll accept it. But on your blog, you could talk about things 10 different ways, and you should. One of the biggest myths in blogging is the idea that you have readers, and the fact is you do not have readers. You have discoverers. If anyone out there looks at their blog analytics, they're going to find that between 80 and greater than 90% of their traffic comes from a first-time visitor. And most of us who blog, we think about what we write today in context to what we wrote yesterday. Well, I talked about the fact that I have granite countertops in my kitchen. I talked about that yesterday. I can't talk about it today because all the people who follow me will be mad because they're reading about granite countertops again. When the reality is you don't have repeat readers. You have discoverers. Anyone who comes, for the most part, to your blog is a first-time visitor. And if your authority is on granite countertops or you think that's a cool thing about the apartment you're renting, you need to talk about that a lot because you want to be the authority on apartments with granite countertops.
I see. That's a really great way to think about it, discoverer rather than reader. I know we've experienced that a lot on our own blog. Yeah, it's just we could say something in a different way, and one way will appeal to one person, and then another way will appeal to another. So that's a great way to think about it.
Right. We're not thought leaders. We don't have we're businesses. Sorry, that's just a fact.
Right.
Even a guy like Chris Brogan, right? I asked him a couple of years ago. He was blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, Chris, come on, man. Let's look at your analytics right now. And this is a guy who is a thought leader, who is a journalist, who does require repeat readers. And his number was 72%. 72% of his traffic was coming from a first-time visitor. He was blown away by that. He never really thought of it. He assumed that everyone he was writing for read what he wrote yesterday or read what he wrote last week. The fact is that 72% of his traffic was coming from people who never heard of him. And that's good, right? That's the biggest problem in marketing, right? We want discoverers. We want to get in front of people that have problems. And once we start blogging that way, we're delivering the right content. And the consumer doesn't land on a blog. They land on a post. They land on a piece of content that Google determines is just right for them. And that's exactly what we want to have happen. You need to make sure you've got great calls to action on your blogs, because most of the time that's going to be the first place people see you if they're searching.
Absolutely. You did mention that SEO is becoming less and less important. We have a question of if you could explain your thoughts a little bit more behind that in terms of content marketing.
Yeah, I hope I didn't say that, because SEO is becoming more and more important.
Okay.
It's critical. Yeah. No, what I think might have been saying was around the idea of keywords and keyword stuffing in SEO,
right?
Which used to be keywords were really, really like the thing in SEO, and that's becoming less important. And not to say it's unimportant, but that algorithm is a moving target, right? The reality is you want to have the exact right piece of content for me, based on things like who am I, where do I live, who are my friends, who are my influences, or how did I do influences, or influences? How did I describe my problem? It's just becoming a much more of a content volume type game than anything else, right? And that's really the only thing you can't game, and that's why Google keeps moving towards content. And they've been moving this way for years. But you look at all like the linking companies and things like that. Not to say linking is unimportant either, but linking used to be everything, right? Your SEO company, that was the main tactic in their bag, was we're going to get you more inbound links, and we're going to get you more relevant links, and you got to use anchor tags, and all of this stuff that Google with Panda and drawing a blank what the other one was, last year Penguin, thank you. Yeah, they washed all that stuff away, and now it's so yes, content marketing and search are they're peanut butter and jelly. They are hand in hand.
Yeah, and we've been seeing that here too. We call it the congruence of social search and content marketing. So they all have to go together. It can't just be SEO and content marketing separated. It has to be smart SEO, smart content marketing, and having everything combined into one kind of force. Right,
and it's interesting that email is the missing link. I was out in a conference in Utah a month ago, I guess, beginning of December, and there were two conferences back to back. And the first conference was search, and they were search and social. Search and social, that's all they talked about. And then a day later, the conference rolls over to email and social, and that's all they talked about. And I'm like, guys, we're all in the same business now, right? There are not these silos, right? If the email people don't have access to the content for the search folks, or the search folks don't have email, because the customer doesn't care, right? The customer or the prospect, they don't know that these are two different departments that don't talk to each other. You need that content. If you need to be relevant, there needs to be a library of a vast amount of data-driven, relevant content that can be accessed for search, can be accessed for social, and can be accessed for email. Three legs to the same stool.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, and this is about video. So it's from Robert, and he says, video can be the most expensive type of content. What ways are your clients using it successfully?
So it can be the most successful, and video is effective content. But it's a tough question, because I'll throw it back to you, and I know I'm not going to get an answer on this, but which team won the most? Which team wins the World Series every year? And you can look at this every year. And you can ask, is it the team that hits the most home runs or the team that hits the most singles? And most people, when they think about video, the answer, of course, is singles, right? You can go back any year you want, and the team that wins the World Series, the San Francisco Giants last year, were #1 in singles and like number 20 in home runs, and they won the World Series. Most people, when they think of video, have these expectations of will it blend, like they're going to get this great viral, blah, 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 it's going to go crazy. They think of video in terms of home run content. And I'm not going to say video can't be great or isn't great. I love video. I live on YouTube. But I also will say that the effort spent in creating one video could probably create 500 spectacular little blog posts targeting specific personas in the funnel. And you will have a whole lot more success if you think about the first things I talked about in this webinar of how do I break down my personas and write the right story for a single mom who's 38 years old with a little boy who's concerned about her security and decorating an apartment. And if I write that piece of content times 400 for the budget that I would spend on putting together a really good video, you would get a lot more bang for that buck, and it would last forever.
Great. That's a brilliant analogy. I love that. We're definitely going to keep looking at that with our own videos. More singles, not as many home runs. I like that.
Exactly. Yeah, we all can't be Will It Blend, right? I mean, that was really, really cool. And the fact is, I don't know how their business is doing. And the subservient chicken was the greatest thing in the world, right? Look at it, got shared. Didn't do anything for Burger King. I mean, they fired the agency a year later and, moved on to something else. I mean, there's lots of really cool viral things, but at the end of the day, that's not what drives our business.
Well, thanks, Chris. I think that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for joining us and giving us all of your expertise. It's been illuminating, to say the least, and all of your examples were really helpful, so thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
And I want to thank you all for coming as well. Thanks from the whole Vertical Measures team. Also, please mark your calendar for our next webinar. It's on February 7th. David Gold, our Director of Creative Services, will be speaking on the topic, which we actually mentioned today, on authorship. So it's going to be called Elevating Your Content with Google Authorship. So it's going to be very interesting. He's a really good source on that topic. Registration is already open for that, so you can head over to our website. It's at verticalmeasures.com/webinars. Again, I'm Quinn, and from all of us at Vertical Measures, thank you for your time and have a great day. Bye.